An historic day at the U.S. Supreme Court that could change the definition of U.S. citizenship. Justices heard oral arguments around President Trump's attempt to limit automatic birthright citizenship. Karen Kaifa joins us live now from Washington, D.C. with more on this. Good afternoon, Karen.
Good afternoon, Christine. This executive order at the heart of this case, signed in January 2025, is so important to President Trump's immigration approach that he attended the oral arguments this morning himself. That is unprecedented for a sitting U.S. president. But the justices expressing some skepticism of the Trump administration's arguments.
U.S. Solicitor General John Sauer making the Trump administration's case to the U.S. Supreme Court that the 14th Amendment of the Constitution was intended to grant citizenship to the children of freed slaves, not immigrants in the country illegally.
Unlike the newly freed slaves, those visitors lack direct and immediate allegiance to the United States.
The case stemming from a challenge to Trump's executive order signed in January 2025, restricting the right of people born in the U.S. to be U.S. citizens. It's since been blocked by lower courts. Trump made an unprecedented appearance at the court, a first for a sitting U.S. president, but left during plaintiff arguments made by Cecilia Wang, National Legal Director of the American Civil Liberties Union, who laid out what's potentially at stake.
Thousands of American babies will immediately lose their citizenship. And if you credit the government's theory, the citizenship of millions of Americans, past, present, and future, could be called into question.
Chief Justice John Roberts pressed Sauer on what he described as quirky arguments, leaning on narrow exceptions to exclude a much larger group from birthright citizenship.
And then you expand it to a whole class of illegal aliens are here in the country. I'm not quite sure how you can get to that big group from such tiny and sort of idiosyncratic examples.
Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson expressed skepticism about the government's practical implementation.
How does this work? Are you suggesting that when a baby is born, people have to have documents, present documents? Is this happening in the delivery room?
Sauer said that parents would have the opportunity to dispute denials of their children's citizenship.
And the arguments this morning lasted just over 2 hours, and now the justices will take time to consider those arguments. A ruling is expected before the end of their current term in June. Christine?
Karen, before you go, how unusual was President Trump's appearance at the U.S. Supreme Court today?
According to the Supreme Court Historical Association, it was a first for a sitting U.S. president. President Trump sat in the first row of the public section, which is typically where members of Congress come to sit to hear these oral arguments. He was joined by the White House counsel and also 2 members of his cabinet, the Attorney General Pam Bondi and also Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. And Christine, remember, it was just a few months ago when President Trump was taking sharp aim at some of the justices he appointed after they ruled against his sweeping global tariffs plan. So to have his presence there in the courtroom was certainly something significant. Chief Justice John Roberts, however, not acknowledging the presence of the president, working to keep that independence of the judicial branch. Trump stayed for about 90 minutes to hear the arguments of the Solicitor General before heading back to the White House.
Okay, Karen Kaifa, live for us out of Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. And Washington Attorney General Nick Brown led a coalition of attorneys general suing the Trump administration when the executive order first came down. In a statement today, they say, quote, "We are optimistic the U.S. Supreme Court will agree with every judge to consider this executive order on the merits and hold that it violates this fundamental constitutional right."